In recent years, the perspective on transformation and healing is fundamentally changing. We're beginning to realize that lasting change doesn't start in the mind, it starts in the body. Welcome to the Trance Movement podcast, where we will be exploring altered states of consciousness through somatic healing practices, embodied spirituality, and what all of that means for your personal path and life. Hi there, my name is Arnoud. I'm a trained psychologist, founder of Trance Movement International, where we work at the forefront of somatic healing practices. If you guide people through transformative workshops, like, for example, breathwork or yoga practices, then you already know that insight alone is not enough. No matter how much you understand even the behavioral patterns that you're stuck in, it doesn't necessarily change anything. Insight doesn't change the nervous system, the body does. You're not just guiding exercises, you're guiding transformation. Most people try to solve their problems by thinking harder, by understanding things better. And for a long time, even in psychology, we thought that this was enough. In this episode, I want to show you why talking isn't enough, why the body is the real entrance point for real change, how that works, and also to provide you with some hands-on exercises, things that you can try out, both in your own personal practices of transformation, healing, becoming, as well as things that might enhance your work as a workshop facilitator. For a long time, Western culture has treated the body as, you could say, something that was kind of in the way of things, just a vehicle for the brain, and in many ways a source of symptoms, something to control or override. But somatic work starts from a very different premise, where the body is an intelligent system that continuously organizes and reorganizes itself. Now, as I've mentioned before, there's a fundamental change happening, a shift towards a more, you could say, somatic perspective. Somatic, the ancient Greek word for the body, and many of these new insights come from scientific research, for example, into the workings of the nervous system. And so, what do all these new insights into the workings of the brain and the body really tell us, and how can we tap into that for real change? I've often said that just scratching the surface of consciousness doesn't really change anything. Only by delving deep into the subconscious, so delving deep into the body, does real lasting change occur. It's a bit like standing on the proverbial tip of the iceberg, where you have decided with your conscious mind that you want to go into this particular direction, but if the whole mass of the iceberg, all the unconscious stuff that's going on in the body, below the surface of consciousness, is moving into a different direction, then it's not really going to happen. So let's acknowledge first and foremost that you have a body, and that most of that operates usually, and most of it, below the level of consciousness. And to start, step by step, becoming a little bit more aware of what's really happening on that level. Because awareness is key, and if you start becoming aware of the things that are already happening, you can also start to work with it more consciously. This taps into the reason why, for example, many coaches and psychologists and therapists advise people to work on their posture. You know, your posture often reflects your inner state, but changing your posture will also change your inner state, your presence, your way of being. Did you know that slouching doesn't just show a depressed state of mind, but that it can even reinforce or create it? Slouching creates such a pressure on the spinal cord that it suppresses your vagal nerve, so it suppresses your calm down signal. It literally causes anxiety, depression, and inflammation, as recent research has shown. Simply straightening the spine, pulling the shoulders back, and lifting the chin will reduce things like anxiety and depression, even without any other interventions. Now, you can do a little experiment, a little exercise to try out how posture really affects your state of mind. And this might sound a little counterintuitive, but in a moment when you feel dysregulated, try to make yourself bigger instead of smaller, as you often tend to do in those situations. You see, your body doesn't just express, but it's also constantly reading data about your state of mind and about safety. So when you are collapsed inward, with your shoulders down, head down, chest concaved, you're sending your brainstem a signal that you need to make yourself small to protect yourself. And so this creates a feedback loop where your body keeps convincing your nervous system that the danger is real, activating your dorsal vagal system and flooding your system with cortisol and adrenaline, keeping you in a perpetual state of anxiety. So when you, in such a moment, physically expand, chest forward, shoulders back, really take up some space, your nervous system will interpret that as the threat has passed. Your ventral vagal system can take over, your heart rate can go down, and you interrupt this feedback loop that you were stuck in. You can do hours of positive thinking and affirmations, but sometimes it's just that simple. Research has shown that standing with your arms raised above your head for 2 minutes will boost confidence. This is very simple but very direct biochemistry. By taking a posture of confidence, of victory or dominance, your brain will start producing matching chemicals that will in turn boost your confidence. Another way how the body-mind connection shows itself and reveals how the bridging of these realms works in two directions is your breath and the patterns of breathing that you have developed. And by bringing your breath to your awareness and changing some of those unconscious breathing patterns, you also change yourself on a deeper level. Actually, we've been exploring this in a previous podcast. Check it out, episode 1. Your body is constantly telling you things, showing you things, even before you on a mental level are aware of it. Your body often knows things even before you are consciously aware of it. For example, do you know that gut feeling that you sometimes have when you meet somebody new and you have this sense that something's off? Although they might seem really friendly and say all the right things, somewhere deep in your stomach there's this weird feeling. In that moment, your brain is processing thousands of micro signals. Maybe something about their posture, the way that they look, and comparing that to all the different interactions that you've ever had throughout your life to, recognize patterns. Maybe there's something in the tone of their voice that doesn't match their words. In a matter of milliseconds, your amygdala, the threat detection center of your brain, processes all this information and compares it to all the interactions you've ever had, moments when you were lied to or had bad experiences with people, and sends all this information to your gut, which is packed with neurons. Some people even call it your second brain. You know, the approximately 500 million neurons in your gut process information a lot faster than conscious thought because it bypasses all the cognitive processing. And so, although your conscious mind might struggle to reconcile all of this, you might be thinking, well, everything's fine, they say the right things, nothing seems to be wrong, don't be paranoid. And so you're trying to convince yourself that everything's fine. And although you might have this deep gut feeling about it, you might still be overriding your own intuition. But that gut feeling, that's millions of years of evolution trying to protect you. So this is just an example of how deep down you already often know a lot more than you are consciously aware of. And that even things like intuition, that seem very ethereal or spiritual, have a physical or somatic foundation. Now, let's look at the flip side of this coin, because you can probably imagine that somebody can also have an overactive amygdala. And let's get real here. We've all been damaged in some ways, in smaller and bigger ways. We've all encountered people, situations that were painful, that were difficult to process. And if you haven't processed these experiences properly, then they will stick. This is where this famous quote by Bessel van der Kolk comes from: "The body keeps the score," which simply means that the tension that was built up in your body during this traumatizing event hasn't been released yet. And so instead it gets stored in the body as tension, maybe in the form of body postures, as we've been looking at, or perhaps in the form of breath patterns, chronic pains, anxiety, depression. The body truly does keep the score. And so, as I've said before, if you happen to be a coach or a therapist or a workshop facilitator, you probably already know that surface level techniques only scratch the surface. What your clients, the people that you work with, really need is depth, forms of transformation that really land in the body. And in the process, make a profound shift in perspective that the body is not the problem, the body is the solution. This is why talking therapy has its limits. The nervous system learns through experience, through sensation, through repetition. And it's constantly sending and receiving information about your safety, about your environment, about your internal states. Polyvagal theory has helped us to understand that this system seems to operate on 3 different levels. First, there is the everyday nervous system state, which we call the ventral vagal state. This is where you feel safe and connected and able to engage with the world around you. And then there's the sympathetic state, which helps you to respond to challenges. This is an activation system that prepares you for action. In your body, this might feel like tension in your muscles, especially in your jaw, in your fists, in your shoulders. You might feel a surge of energy or heat. And often this expresses itself in the form of anger, irritability, being really sharp. This is what people usually mean when they talk about the fight or flight response, but it's a oversimplification. because this is also the system that simply helps you with handling everyday stress, like meeting your deadlines or preparing for a presentation. And then there's the dorsal vagal state, which actually helps you to preserve energy when you feel overwhelmed. This is when fighting or escaping the situation is not possible. This is what they usually call the freeze response, but that's a very limited perspective on it. So this is kind of a dissociative state where you feel like shutting down, like feeling numb or wanting to disappear. Looking at this state from a more shamanic perspective, you could say this is the state where you suffer from potential soul loss. Another big topic that we will definitely be exploring in a future episode. Now, I know that this freeze response can feel very, very uncomfortable, but it's actually a beautiful mechanism where your body protects you from feelings that are too overwhelming or too painful to handle. So what really happens when a person gets traumatized is that the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, HPA in short, responsible for controlling body functions such as breathing, heartbeat, blood pressure, as well as the endocrine stress response, gets sensitized in the process. Actually, in any stressful situation, again, the amygdala sends a distress signal to the hypothalamus, which then activates the sympathetic nervous system, triggering the fight or flight response. Now, as long as the brain keeps perceiving the situation as a threat, as dangerous, a whole cascade of hormones, including cortisol, will be released. Normally, in a healthy person and in a healthy situation, this HPA axis will ensure that once the threat has passed, this cortisol release is stopped and the system can return to normal. But if this HPA axis is sensitized, it can stay activated and the stress response can become chronic. By now you must have noticed that I am truly fascinated with science and scientific discovery, and that I think that we live in truly fascinating times. And in my practices and my teachings, I'm always trying to connect the more objective, physical, somatic parts of the process to the more subjective experience of mind and spirit. Looking at and learning from nature and working with human nature. As I've shown in a previous episode on breath awareness, is how can you become more aware of the self-regulating that you are already doing with your breathing, and in the process become a conscious agent. Facilitation means helping the nervous system to naturally, effectively reorganize itself. And this is not just beneficial for dealing with big things like healing from trauma, but also with really common daily stuff, right? Like dealing with chronic stress or emotional reactivity or creative blocks, or perhaps feeling disconnected or missing a sense of meaning or purpose. When you're stuck in any kind of way, the body is not the problem, it's the entrance. And you know, there's a bunch of practices, techniques that we all put together in this one powerful practice we call trance movement that work really well. Of course, there's a couple of obvious things like the fact that we move our bodies, the fact that we do this on rhythm, sound, and music. These are topics that are in and of itself worthwhile to devote a complete episode to. So we will, in the future, look at things like how does music and sound and rhythm affect the body, the brain, the nervous system? How is all of that connected to movement? And it is, our perception of rhythm is very deeply connected to movement. But for now, I would like to take another example, the fact that we make our journeys through darkness and that we work a lot with blindfolds. In a previous episode, we've started to explore this topic, blindfolds and darkness, so you can check that out. But for now, I just want to point out how darkness physically, somatically, truly affects our state of mind. There's a very simple technique that you can try out yourself called palming, or some people call it eye cupping, that calms down the nervous system very quickly, where you place the palms of your hands as a cup over your eyes, closing off all the light. Now, if you do this, even just for 20 or 30 seconds, it will start calming down your nervous system. It's not yet fully understood how this works, but it seems to activate the vagus nerve to send calming signals to the brain and the rest of the body, and it seems to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the body's rest and digest system. This, together with the sensory input reduction, so taking away the flood of input that's coming in through your eyes, helps to reduce stress, release physical tension, and, promote overall relaxation. Apparently, some athletes or surgeons seem to use this technique between performances to stay calm and focused. But of course, so can you, and why not? Why not, once in a while, between chores and tasks, take a moment, 30 seconds, of some palming, and a moment to really drop back into the felt presence of the moment, into you. As we do with trance movement, where we devote a full hour, hour and a half, to a blindfolded exploration. Of course, this is also where safety comes into play, which is a really essential part for any healing or transformation to take place. I think this is even one of the most important skills of a workshop facilitator, to create an environment where people really feel safe. If not, nothing's really happening, and people can even potentially get re-traumatized in the process. But once you have created this safety, and once you start within that context to work with mind-altering somatic techniques like breath work, movement, sound and rhythm, music, but also blindfolds and darkness, as we do a lot, you will be astonished by the level of depth and the level of transformation that people are able to reach. So far, at the start of this podcast, I've been introducing different topics like blindfolds and darkness, breath work, breath awareness, somatic therapies. But all of these topics, and also future topics like music and sound and rhythm, movement, will all be expanded upon in the future. I will share with you more ideas, perspectives, and also practices and techniques you can try. So at some point there will be separate sections and playlists completely devoted to, for example, sound and music. For now, let me leave you with this. Why don't you just stop trying to fix yourself by overanalyzing and start to listen to the signals that your body is sending you, working with the nervous system, with your body, with nature, not against it. So, if you want to learn more, This has been kind of a brief introduction into somatic therapy, somatic practices. Then you might want to consider subscribing for future content. If you have any specific questions or topics that you would like me to get into, please send us a message. You can check us out on our website, trance-movement.com. And if you really want to learn more about facilitation of these practices, of these processes, and become part of a global community of trance movement facilitators, then of course you're welcome to enroll in our facilitator training program. If you're a workshop facilitator who wants to guide real transformation and not just surface experiences, there is a path to expand your capacity. You don't need to fix the mind, you need to guide the body, allowing the body-mind system to heal itself. As Peter Levine, the founder of Somatic Experiencing, once beautifully wrote, "Remember, nature is on our side."